Hello and happy Fossil Friday. I'm David. I'm a paleontologist at the Gray Fossil Site here in Gray, Tennessee. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about the big animals we find at the Gray Site, things like alligators. But just like today's ecosystems, some of the most common and most important animals are small ones. And my favorite group of small animals are snakes. Now this, of course, is not a fossil snake. This is Neo. He's a steppes rat snake. But we do find his relatives, ancient relatives, at the Gray Fossil Site. Fossils from 5 million years ago. Now, when we're identifying fossil animals at Gray, we're typically using their bones and teeth to determine what kinds of animals they were. And snakes do have bones and teeth. Neo has a skull in his head, just like you and I do. And he's got a long backbone with ribs attached to it. But studying snakes in the fossil record can be a little tricky because their skeletons are kind of weird. For example, some of the most useful bones and important bones for identifying fossils are often leg bones. Leg bones can tell you what kind of animal you had, how they were moving and living. This is a 3D printed model of a leg bone from our Gray Fossil Site panda. We've used leg fossils at Gray, bones of animal legs, to help identify our camels, we have our panda legs, our moles, things like that. But animals like Neo tend not to have leg bones, so those don't really help us. Now, some of the most useful bones for identification are skulls and teeth, like this cast of our alligator. Skulls and teeth are super handy, and we've used them to identify Gray Fossil Site rhinos, mastodons, rabbits, rodents, all sorts of things. Now, snakes have skulls, like I said, but they're a little bit different. So this is the top part of a skull of a Burmese python. Not a fossil. This one passed away several years ago. And you can see it's got all these teeth, but snake teeth tend to look pretty similar from species to species. So they don't always help us much with identifying what kind of snake they are if we find them as fossils. And the skull bones are a little unusual. In a lot of places there are gaps between the bones where the bones aren't held together very strongly. For a living snake, this is great. It makes their skulls very flexible, and it's part of what lets them expand their jaws around their prey. But it means that when a snake dies and is laying out on the ground, the skull bones tend to fall apart from each other, and each bone is often small and delicate, so they tend not to survive becoming fossils. So we end up with animals that don't leave behind very many leg bones, and even their skulls don't always fossilize very well. But you know what snakes have a lot of? Backbone. This is the spine of that Burmese python. It's held together with a string here. And just like your spine, this spine is made up of individual bones called vertebrae. Snakes, like this python and Neo, can have hundreds of vertebrae. And they're boxy and sturdy, and they survive pretty well as fossils. Here's the thing. A python is a big snake. Most snakes, and most of the ones we see at fossil sites, are more like Neo's size. So we have to look very closely in order to see those tiny bones. Now, fortunately for scientists, we have
microscopes that can help us look at tiny bones.
And fortunately for you, we have 3D printers. Recently, we were able to get a scan of a snake vertebra from the Gray Fossil Site, about the size of what Neo's vertebrae would be, and then create a digital model and expand it to make a much larger version. And then we printed it. This is a 3D printed replica of a garter snake vertebra from the Gray Fossil Site, a 5 million year old snake bone. The original is about 10 times smaller than this, a few millimeters long. Using vertebrae, we've been able to identify garter snakes, water snakes, rat snakes, not too different from Neo, even some venomous vipers like today's rattlesnakes and copperheads among the fossil snakes at Gray. We've even identified one type of snake that's never been seen anywhere else before, which we've called the Zealot Snake, which would have been even smaller than Neo. There is a lot we can learn about ancient ecosystems and especially food webs by looking at snakes. You know, when you think about predators, you often think about big things, and at Gray we have gators and saber-toothed cats, and those would have been important predators of horses and rhinos and camels in ancient Gray. But that ecosystem was also home to mice and rabbits and lizards and salamanders and frogs. And for those little animals, some of the most important predators were snakes. There's a lot to learn about the ancient ecosystems at ancient Gray. By looking at animals like this, we just have to be able to look very closely. Do you have pets? A dog or a cat or something else? What did their fossil relatives look like? If you go online and do a search for fossil dog or cat or fossil whatever your pet is, what will you find? Where did their ancient relatives live? What do you think their roles were in their ancient ecosystem? See what you can find out. I'm going to put Neo back in his home. You've been a very, very cooperative video partner for me today, and I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.